Hey everyone, Brian Mullin here. 2 days ago we had a new moon. Today is April 9th, 2016, and the new moon was on the 7th. And so in the spirit of the new moon cycle, I'm proposing a new way to look at the moon with a new theory, and that is fire and ice theory. Now it's very simple really. In a nutshell, hot sun, cold moon, warm earth. And I have to give credit to Shucksful, who left that comment on my moon footage video. It was very cool. I like the way it sounds. Good. It keeps the whole thing simple. Good phrase. But fire and ice theory, FIT for short. And this theory has three main aspects. Scientific, of course, spiritual, which I think may be the most important, and of course conspiracy. Because if it is true, it is a conspiracy that it's been kept from us, or there is a conspiracy to keep it from us. And so, starting with scientific, what I have here is a model of the basics of what would be happening if this theory is true. And it's not to scale, of course, but it's based on a lot of what I talked about in Balls Out Physics episode 4, so if you haven't seen that and or you don't know much about heat transfer or the basics of thermodynamics, I highly recommend watching those before diving into this. But the idea is we have a moon, cold moon, hot sun, Earth down here. Energy from the sun, heat, is given to Earth, and then as the sun moves over the Earth and as light from the sun passes by, becomes night, or the sun goes out of view, whatever you want to call it, heat radiates up to the colder layers of the air, the meso layer, and eventually back to the moon. And what really pushed me, or what made me think about this theory, is all the work that the Flat Earth community has done to show that the moonlight has a cooling effect on the Earth. And if that's true, which I've found to be true through my own experiments, that would mean that heat energy is flowing to the moon, because second law of thermodynamics says hot goes to cold. High areas of higher energy always flow to areas of low energy. Hot goes to cold. Very simple. Okay, so I've got the layers of our air, or atmosphere, whatever you want to call it. Down here on Earth, where we would be, is the troposphere, the tropo layer, then the strato layer, meso layer, and then the thermo layer. And as you can see, thermo is cold, so I call that the ice area, and fire is hot, so that's where the fire would be. But you would think at first that the moon would be in the meso layer, and that's what I thought. But I think they're both up here, and that's based on a video I just watched. Again, actually, from an amateur rocket launch, a Go Fast rocket that was launched in 2014. And if you haven't watched that yet, please watch it right now, because I'm going to talk about it. So wait a second. And assumed you watched it. So when you watch that video, the rocket takes off. Camera's pointing down. For some reason, cameras are always pointing down and never up, which would be nice if we could see what's going on when they're going up. But anyway, camera's pointing down. Rocket takes off. And pretty quickly the rocket starts spinning around like crazy. I mean, you can see the fins and you can see the ground spinning. It might make you dizzy if you stare at it too long. So the rocket's spinning as it's traveling up. And about 1 minute into the flight, it suddenly just stops. Rocket just stops. And that spinning stops, everything just stops, and it just kind of sits there for a second. And some people have suggested that it hit a dome that may be above us, but I thought at that velocity it would have been destroyed. So I didn't think much of it when I originally watched it, but I have to thank a guy named Jeff who just sent it to me again, because it really put some pieces together for what I was working on with this. And when you watch the video, the rocket just stops. And so I started looking up the stats. That rocket went over 3,500 miles per hour on that trip. Now, it might not have been going that fast when it stopped, but it was going a few thousand miles per hour at least, and it just, all that energy just suddenly, where did it go? Rockets don't have brakes. It literally stops, and I mean the rotation keeps going a little bit, but all of that angular momentum from the rotation of the rocket and the linear momentum from flying up just stopped? No, it had to have hit something. But what did it hit? If it hit a solid surface, the rocket would have been destroyed, and most likely the camera too, so we wouldn't have the footage, and obviously that's not the case. So when you start watching it, around that time, around a minute in, a few seconds later, the two stages separate. It's a two-stage rocket, it looks like, and you watch the bottom half of the rocket start to fall down, as you would expect. But then the upper half, the way the camera's mounted to it, starts spinning around, and very slowly it starts to fall back towards Earth. Very slowly. And you might think, well, I have it up here, the Go Fast rocket got up to about 117 kilometers. And outer space is considered in the thermal layer. Once you cross into the thermal layers, technically you're in outer space. But what doesn't make sense is, just because you fly vertically into outer space doesn't mean that you're just going to float there. That's not how it works, based on the heliocentric model. If you watch Balls Out Physics Episode 3, I talked about how you have to have an orbital velocity, and these orbital velocities are incredibly fast. You have to be orbiting the Earth to resist the force pulling down on you, gravity, weight, whatever you want to call it, that pulls down on you. You have to do that. You have to do, basically, this string is gravity. Just to show this again, if you haven't seen that, you have to be moving at a high velocity to resist that force. That rocket went straight up, so it should have fallen straight back down. Now, just to see what the acceleration on that rocket should be, assuming very thin, almost no air up here, because that's what's supposed to be there, I did a calculation at 117 kilometers plus the radius of the Earth, and I found that the acceleration towards Earth, due to gravity, if you want to call it that, or due to weight, should be roughly 9.46 meters per second squared. That's not much. That rate is pretty close to the rate at sea level, which is 9.81 meters per second squared. So it should have basically done this, but it didn't. It stops, and then it just kind of slowly starts sinking, like it's in water or some type of liquid. That's what it looks like. If you really start watching it, the way those pieces are falling, if you get to about 2 minutes and 10 seconds in, you see the other stage, the lower half of the rocket, still slowly tumbling down like it's in water. According to mainstream science, as you get up in these layers, as the temperature goes up, as you get up in these layers, the pressure decreases. The pressure becomes almost nothing in the thermo layer and meso layer as well. But suddenly it just kind of stops and then slowly starts sinking. What's going on here? Is there water there? There's some kind of liquid? Or some kind of very, very dense gas? Scriptures tell us that there is water up there. That's interesting. So the rocket just stops. Okay. Well, then there's the lunar wave that Crow 77 filmed in 2012. If you haven't seen that, I've also posted a link down there. And in that video, you see the moon, and you see what looks like a wave of water go across the surface of it. It's crazy. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. So you combine that with how this rocket behaves, and now I'm starting to think that I've seen enough evidence that I can actually write this right here. H2O. And this mesopause, as this area is called, where the temperature starts to increase as you cross into the thermo layer. I mean, rapidly increases up to 500 to 1500 degrees Celsius. There appears to be some water. Now that contradicts mainstream science, but I'm going by what I see. And so the idea of this theory of fire and ice theory is that heat is moving towards the center of the cold, the moon. So heat is moving through these layers. Now what doesn't really make sense yet is that right here about the strato and meso barrier, the temperature is around 0 degrees, and down here at the tropo and the strato barrier, you're at negative 50 degrees. So it's actually colder here. That doesn't really make sense, but we've got to trust that all these temperature readings are right. There might be something else going on here. If this heat is flowing towards the moon, then when you measure these temperatures, it's going to depend on where these two things are. So for now, I'm assuming that heat is flowing up gradually towards the moon. That's what I've got here. Hot sunlight. Well, sunlight apparently is not hot, but the sunlight heats the air, so all this air would be warm, and then all of the heat is gradually making its way to the moon somehow. And so the moon then somehow gives that energy back to the sun, and it's like a closed system, kind of like how a battery would work. And so that's why I have negative here, cathode, anode. Flow of energy, a system of energy. Kind of like a divine machine or a divine system that we live in. Makes a lot of sense. A lot of people have told me, even engineers have said, wow, that just feels right. Feels really right to me, but we're not allowed to feel in science. So we need to do some more testing here. We need to really show that this moonlight is cooling the Earth. Now, I've done a lot of testing with my thermal imaging camera. I went out and bought a thermal imaging camera just for this. And I also went and I picked up another IR thermometer just to have another instrument to test with, to use these against each other. And this laser grip 774 works pretty well for the $20 I got it off of Amazon for. So if you want to get involved with this and do some moonlight tests, and having one of these is great, please go out and get one and join in the fun. I also proposed an experiment on March 23rd, which I apologize to everybody that participated. I haven't gotten back to the experiment I did and getting everybody's results together. I wanted to get Balls Out Physics 4 and 5 done so I could do this. But thank you for everyone who participated in that. It was really awesome seeing all the results with candle lights, with lit candles, and that was the experiment, was to have lit candles in the moonlight and in the shade, and see if the candles in the moonlight burned down faster, because the theory was that there would be a greater potential difference between the heat of the flame and the colder surroundings, so the flame would burn more intense. But one thing I didn't think about is that the cooling moonlight would also cool the wax below the flame, so it could be a wash. But the results were pretty mixed. Some people had faster candles burned down faster in the shade, some in the moonlight, and then people like me had no real conclusive results. And so it's not really the best test. But we lit candles for the moon, and I think the moon has been underappreciated, so I don't think it was too much of a waste. And having everybody come together to try to do an experiment was awesome. And there were also the temperature tests that a lot of people did, and across the board, everybody shows that in the moonlight, the temperature of any material exposed to moonlight is much colder than in the shade. And from doing experiments myself, when the moon is not present, there is a difference in exposed areas, and I think that's this. More exposed areas, there's more open air for heat to escape, hot going to cold, there's more area for it to radiate up, but it's nowhere near as intense as when you're in direct moonlight, which is really interesting. Another thing is, how do the stars play into this? And I've been thinking about that a lot, and been talking with another YouTuber named Peaches and Speeches, who has some really good ideas. A very smart young woman, and she also posted an Edgar Allan Poe poem on my moon footage video that has led to some ideas. But for now, I'm going to stay away from the stars, because just focusing on the sun and the moon, I think, is where we need to start. So this is just the basics of the theory, and if you're interested, please offer suggestions, criticism, whatever. But I think this is a pretty valid theory. It makes a lot of sense. So that's the idea. Hot flows to cold. And it might not be just, I think I've got negative and positive. I think this might be electrical energy. Who knows what kind of energies are flowing through this world and flowing through us as well. Something to consider. So, hot sun, cold moon, warm earth. Simple as that. Sun and moon are up here somewhere in the thermo layer. If you're watching that rocket video, that's where they appear to be. But of course, the sunlight's really bright, so you can't tell where it is. And people argue that it's that it's it's 93 million miles away, but I can clearly see on cloudy days that the light rays make basically a 90-degree angle between them, or 45 degrees to the horizontal, whatever you want to call it. There's no way it's that far away. It can't be. That scattering would happen, or that light effect would happen all over the sky if it was 93 million miles away, but it only happens where the sun appears to be. But I'll get back into that in a sub-episode, the Balls Out Physics episode 3. So, that's the scientific part of it. We need to do more experiments to prove the cooling moonlight. But what I really like about this theory as well is, with flat Earth theory, when you start talking to someone new to that theory about all the things they can't, that's a lot to drop on somebody. But going up to someone and say, hey, did you know that moonlight has a cooling effect? That will get somebody interested, because it's not so huge that the whole heliocentric model might not be true and it might be a lie, etc. So cooling moonlight is a great place to start, I think, just to get people into the spirit of questioning the world in which they've been taught they live in. So, idea, I really want to know what's going on with this water up here. Watch that video. Seriously, watch the 2 stages of the rocket and how they start to fall. There's no way that can be weightlessness. They should fall right down. Even if everything we're taught about the heliocentric model is true, they should fall right down. There should be no delay like that. Not at all. And what stopped that? All of that energy, all of that momentum just stops. And it had to be soft because the rocket would have been destroyed. So, just summing the scientific part. So, now let's get into the spiritual side. A few months ago, Marmar Queen released a beautiful video about how the male and female and the sun and the moon appear to be connected. And it felt right to me. The idea is that the sun is male and the moon is female. Makes a lot of sense. Giver, receiver, works well with our anatomy. So I've also posted a link to her video below. It's great, you should watch it. And she basically said that we've focused on the masculine so much that we're out of balance. And I do believe that is true. I mean, if our world model, if the heliocentric model, the solar system model isn't true, and we do live on in a geocentric world, then we've been basically making the sun much bigger than it actually is, and much bigger than it appears to be. And I think they're the same size as they appear. So this flow of energy flows from the sun through the earth, through us, and back to the moon. Are we supposed to be participating in this? I don't know. Are we supposed to take in sunlight? You know, everybody likes to go out. Well, not everybody, but most people like to go out and get some sun. Are we supposed to do something? Are we supposed to give something back to the moon? If you believe in divinity, you might be interested in this. I know divinity exists. I found it through science, but I can also feel it. I'm not allowed to feel in science, but hey, I know it's there. I know that this is some type of divine machine. But we have to prove it scientifically to this world as well. But thinking about divinity and sun and the moon and sun, and female, male, feminine, masculine. Feminine and masculine to me are just equal and opposite expressions of divinity itself. That just makes a lot of sense. So wouldn't it make sense that the moon and the sun would be echoes of that as well? Equal and opposite expressions of divinity? The moon being cold, dense, matter, potential, as it's typically called in the electrical system. Cold, dense potential. The potential for everything. And then the sun, the kinetic, the expanding, hot expression of that potential for creation. Is that really that far-fetched? Is it far-fetched to think that if we have a burning ball of fire in our sky, in the heavens above us, that we also have a freezing ball of ice? Well, if it wasn't for all these space programs and the heliocentric models, Copernican principle, all that stuff, this probably wouldn't be far-fetched if you went back and told a Native American this before the Europeans came. They'd probably go, oh yeah, that could be. Or they might already believe it. I don't think that would seem far-fetched to somebody who just lives on this earth and never sees rockets go up. And if you've watched Balls Out Physics episode 4 and 5, I don't believe that human beings have ever been to space. I think it's a hoax. And so that leads into the conspiracy side of this. Why would this flow of energy be hidden from us? Well, first of all, if this energy is flowing through us and we can harness it somehow, people out there who have invested a lot of money in oil and coal and any type of metered energy don't want us to know that, because then we don't need their product anymore. So that's one thing. But I think it might go a lot deeper than that. I wonder why these space programs have faked all this stuff. A lot of people out there agree with me on this. A lot of people watching this probably do. I thought at first it was to cover up what the shape of our world really is, and that could be. It could be that it's flat and they don't want us to know that, or concave, or whatever. At the moment, I'm not worried about what the shape of the world is, because I think this energy flow has a much bigger effect on our daily lives, and we need to figure this out first. And so this is where I'm headed. There's plenty of people out there arguing over whether the Earth is flat or a sphere, and to be honest, I don't want to debate about it anymore until we get this one figured out. So that's where I'm going. But thinking of the space programs, I went back and just hit me the other day looking at NASA's original logo here. Well, this is actually the color one. I think the original one was black and white. But just look at this logo for a second. What do you see there? Well, first of all, there's a sun that's much bigger than the moon, and per our model, our accepted mainstream model, it's supposed to be 400 times bigger than the moon. Okay, but then you see this rocket coming. It's supposed to be. It looks like a rocket orbiting the sun, right? And that's okay at first glance. Well, it's NASA. That would make sense, but it kind of looks like a tadpole or the male seed. And then if you trace the tail back to the sun, well, look at that. It actually comes out of the sun, which creeped me out when I noticed that. It's not orbiting it. It's coming out of the sun. And it's heading towards the moon. That's weird. Male seed headed towards the moon? Is that just a coincidence? The artist didn't do that intentionally? And then, of course, there's the infamous red vector, which looks like a serpent tongue. And then this very strange shadow here that kind of looks like a serpent eye. So the serpent, the snake, could be satanic, could be also phallic. Snake is a phallic symbol. Could be both. Phallic symbol makes me think of my favorite Chuck Norris joke that involves a live rattlesnake, but I'll let you look that up if you don't know it. But all that masculine symbolism, the sun symbolism all over the world. I mean, this world is definitely dominated by masculinity right now. It is. And, there's a lot of chaos going on, a lot of war. And it looks like we're being set up for another war, but it's not going to happen. We're not letting this happen again, guys. No way. We're not going to a World War III. It's not going to happen. So just put that in your mind right now. It's not happening. Mind and hearts, that's not happening. Because we're remembering the shape of our world, I think, and we're also remembering the source and the kinetic, potential and kinetic, negative and positive. This flow of energy. I believe it exists. I want to prove it scientifically to the world so we can get back in tune with it. I think there's others who agree with me on this. So, if you noticed, I also have a lady and a man down here that I drew. Same size, equal. Both with long hair though, because I'm growing my hair out, so dude's got long hair and a beard. So, that's the idea. This system I have drawn here is working. That was the idea, draw a working system. And it might not look like this right now because I think we might be out of tune with it and we might affect it a lot. Our consciousness is very powerful, I think, and I'll talk about that in Balls Out Physics episode 6. I think that's a very important topic for us to discuss because we don't talk about it in school. So I'm going to be doing this full time, but I'm also going to be growing food full time. I'm going to learn to grow food in my suburban home and hopefully share that knowledge with others, because to get off of these fiat currency systems and the system of just paying bills and debt slavery and working till the day you die, we got to stop this. It doesn't have to be like this. With our technology, we could grow so much food and have so much water that we wouldn't have to work these 9-to-5 jobs and sit in front of glowing computer screens all day long. It does not have to be like this. We know this, guys. We do. So let's change it. And I think by getting in flow with this, we can do that. And I've also wondered, is this what Tesla knew? Is this how Tesla made free energy? There's all this stuff that supposedly he made free energy, and nobody's been able to emulate it. I don't know, or nobody's been able to recreate it. And I haven't looked into Eric Dollar's work that much. I'm just scratching the surface on these ideas. But the few things I have seen seem to only want to emulate how the sun works. And if it is a flow, this might be the missing piece. She might be the missing piece. And that might be what the whole point of all these space agencies was to show that it was just a rock, so we forget about her. We forget about the flow. We forget about the connection. That NASA symbol is very telling to me. So that's what I think, though. Make up your own mind. But if you agree, or you want to get involved and see if it's real, show some love to the moon, do some temperature experiments, and let's see where we can go with this. So, until next time, peace, in and out. Hey everyone, Brian Mullin here. This is Fire and Ice Theory, Part 2. And I just want to go over a couple more things that I didn't talk about in Part 1, and also start off with the Go Fast rocket, which was brought up a lot of debate in the first part, and I have to admit that I did not know about yo-yo de-spin devices. I spent some time looking into them, and they're pretty awesome what they do. I didn't know such things existed. And so according to the Go Fast team and some other videos, I found that apparently the yo-yo device went off at the height of the launch, or the maximum height of the launch, it appears, and that's what stopped the rocket from spinning. And you can actually see it, what it looks like, the yo-yo device, at about 3 minutes and 46 seconds. The third camera. There's 3 cameras throughout the flight. They show, the recording of each camera over the whole video, and I want to focus on the first and last cameras. The second one is a lot like the first, and that also brings up the same question: why don't they ever have a camera pointing up? Now we have 3 different cameras all taking video from different perspectives, but never one pointing up. Why doesn't anybody ever want to look out into space? But I don't know. So anyway, going to the rocket. Now, the rocket had 2 stages, as I mentioned before, and you can see in the video. And each one of these stages has a mass, right? And the mass of the bottom stage can be assumed to be greater than the mass of the nose. I'm going to call the bottom the engine and the nose. So mass engine greater than mass nose, because this is where the engine is. You don't want a top-heavy rocket, so we can definitely assume this. I think it's safe to say that. And so, what happens at about 1 minute and 6 seconds on the first camera is, the rocket flies up, yo-yo device goes off, you can hear it, and the spinning stops, and then it's just kind of sitting there as it's reached its max height, and it's going to start falling back to Earth. And so the stages separate. Okay, you hear the noise and you see the ice that's built up on the outside of the rocket break off. Okay, so all that ice kind of breaks off as the 2 stages separate. And so you would think that when the stages separate, they're forced apart. And I've looked into these devices, or the mechanicisms, whatever you want to call it, that separate the rockets, and some of them create a force between the 2 stages to push them apart. Okay? But it doesn't look like that happens at 1 minute and 6 seconds. It looks like they start to separate, and then there's the initial movement away from each other, and then you notice that the bottom stage, or the engine part of the rocket starts to fall. The rate of its fall starts to increase after the initial separation. If you watch that around 1 minute and 6 seconds, watch that a few times. But then I said, okay, that's kind of a problem, that this piece is falling faster than this piece, because in a vacuum, or in the thermosphere where this is supposed to be, there should be hardly any matter. So these two objects should fall at the same rate, or they should accelerate towards Earth at the same rate. On Balls Out Physics episode 2 and 3, I can't remember which one at the moment, but I linked the video to I think it was called Human Universe, a BBC series where Professor Brian Cox came from the UK, the United States, to do an experiment with a bowling ball and some feathers in NASA's vacuum chamber at the Glenn Research Center, and they show how in a vacuum both objects fall or accelerate towards Earth at the same rate. So the same thing should happen here. Both of these objects should accelerate down at the same rate, unless they're in a liquid, because this one would be more massive, so it would fall faster, or unless they were forced apart by the stage separation. That would create a force and an acceleration, or an increased acceleration on the bottom stage. But if you go to about 3 minutes and 46 seconds, where you see the yo-yo device go off, and then wait another 10 seconds to about 10:55 or 3:55 to 3:56, you hear the stage separation, and you see the ice fly off, and you can also see the horizon from the way the camera's orientated. And I've watched this over and over again, and I do not see any acceleration from the separation. I do not see this piece accelerating up. And to have a force, you have to have an acceleration, because F equals ma. It does not appear like there is a force pushing these two pieces apart. And then if you watch the video throughout, you can see every now and then the nose camera catches the engine, and it's significantly farther down, or it's dropped significantly farther than this nose piece is. This nose piece, which you would think it would be very light, just kind of almost seems like it's floating, like there's buoyant forces acting on it. And this was really the premise of what I was talking about in the first episode. I didn't get into the fact that the acceleration of the engine appears to be greater than the acceleration of the nose. I mean, that's definitely true, whether it's created by this force or they're in a liquid, and because this is more massive, a liquid or a gas, because this piece is more massive, it's falling faster than this piece is, because buoyancy is having a greater effect, or buoyant forces are having a greater effect on the nose, if you want to look at it that way. So, to me, it does not seem like there is a force in a stage separation. So, I think this is falling faster because it's in a liquid. And then another thing, there's ice crystals all over the outside of the rocket. Now, it gets cold as you go up, but in the thermosphere at 117 kilometers, bringing back this chart that you might be getting tired of seeing, go fast is here, temperature 200 degrees Celsius. Now, as we're told, in the thermosphere, you should see a cold temperature, so I guess the ice crystals could stay there. But still, listen to the sounds. It seems like there's some kind of liquid up there. It really does. I think so, but you be the judge. So, going back to fire and ice theory, I made a couple changes. I was assuming that this thermo layer was very hot. What if it's not? What if it's actually cold? And the sun is actually surrounded by cold, not hot. And infinite potential is what surrounds the sun. And this is why everything radiates up to that cold area that surrounds us. And also to the moon as well. I've still found that the moon is, the moonlight does appear to cool the Earth more than the surrounded shading areas. I've been doing experiments with that, which I'll get into in later videos. But Yeah, how do we know that this isn't ice? How do we know that it's not really cold up there? We know that the temperatures are supposed to, the thermometer should show a cold temperature. So is what we're told really what's happening? Is it really a thermo layer? I don't know. Can we get rid of this altogether? And so it would be fire, ice, of course the moon, and then the layers around us. Well, since I don't know what to trust anymore, I've gone back to this a lot, especially recently. I was born into a Catholic family, and this is actually my mother's Bible, but I keep going back to this that I, a year and a half ago, made fun of to my roommate, and then had to put my foot in my mouth because, I don't know, this could actually be a depiction of our Earth or something similar to it. But as you can see, there are waters above the firmament in this picture, and then it has firmament of the sky, which might allude to some type of liquid up here, maybe. But, of course, this is an illustration. So I'm using this as my basis for now, because I've been pulled back to Christianity in so many different ways in the past few months. Really, after Balls Out Physics episode 4, all kinds of things started happening, and I'll be honest, I was a bit opposed to it until about the beginning of this year. Doors started opening, so to say. And what I want to point out is, when I first started thinking about the moon and sun relationship after Balls Out Physics episode 4, I'll never forget this. I was home visiting my family, and I was taking my dog for a walk, and I started thinking moon and sun, moon and sun. I started thinking moon and sun, and then all of a sudden it hit me: moon, mom, and sun. And I immediately thought the Virgin, potential Mother Mary. I didn't want to say that in the last episode because I'm not saying that the moon is actually Mother Mary, but it's kind of an echo, as the term I used in Givers and Receivers, if you saw that. And then the sun, of course, being the son of the mother. And that was the point of the song at the end of the last episode as well, or the last part. And so the idea is that this is a mom and son relationship, not to be confused with Mary and Jesus. But it's interesting to think that potential, the sun is kinetic energy, obviously, and then the moon or ice around it would be the potential, infinite potential, and the expression of that potential is the sun. And I see a symbolic relationship, or an echo, mimic, with the way God came into our world through a virgin mother and born as a son. Could be coincidental, but I don't know. It's not far-fetched for me to think that God would come into our world mimicking God's creation, or how part of it works. And so that was the first thing I thought, but I was hesitant to say that, or one of the first things I thought, and then the day I realized that, the corresponding mother-son moments that happened after that were just mind-blowing to me, between myself and other people around me. Right after I realized that, a very good friend of mine happened to call me, and I was in the middle of realizing this, fighting with my dog, and I'm just like, okay, I'll call him back. And he left me a voicemail, which he never does. And so I got back to the house, started to listen to the voicemail, and what had happened was he couldn't hang up his phone for some reason, so he just shoved it in his pocket. And he happened to be riding with his mother in a car. I know his mother well. And I proceeded to hear a conversation between he and his mother. I said, "Oh, weird, I'm not listening to this," and I hung up. But there was a 4-minute message of mom and son left on my phone right after I started thinking about all this. So, could be a coincidence, but then shortly after that there was another incident with my grandmother and her son, my uncle, who happened to be there, and I'm not going to get into that one because it's too personal, or too family personal, but it was just amazing how all that came to be. And so I didn't want to, throw that out there because, it's all speculation or just coincidences, what people would say, but I don't really believe in coincidences anymore, so I think there's something to it. That's my theory, though. One more thing I want to point out is I did say H2O, or water or something could be up here in the last episode. Now, I said divine water because, if a rocket hit water as it exists on Earth at that velocity, it would be destroyed, too. I mean, water is very dense. But I said divine water, but could it also be ether, or also spelled ether, I've seen. Plasma maybe, but that would be a superheated gas, so it would be very hot. But there's other ideas for what is actually up there, if there's liquid up here, which I think the Go Fast rocket shows us. And then there's also the lunar wave, which Crow 777 films. So, ideas, throwing them out there. I'm really starting to see connections between spirituality and science and all this, though, and so I wanted to get that out there. So, till next time, peace.